Today I'm going to talk about TotalBiscuit. I didn't know whether to make this video or not. I have been concerned about it for the last couple of days. I didn't know if it would be disrespectful and self-indulgent to talk about my experience and how he impacted me. But then at the same time, I felt it would be disrespectful just to continue on and make videos without addressing it in some way. So I'm kind of in a catch-22 here, and I watched some other people's videos, and I just got done watching Tarmac's video on how he influenced him. So many years ago now, I was having a very hard time in life. I was struggling with some mental health issues. For those of you that don't know, I struggle with anxiety, and life was not good for me back then. And I found solace in a game called World of Warcraft. And it was a great game, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. It's one of my favorite games of all time. And, you know, World of Warcraft can get a little boring sometimes, so I started looking for podcasts. Something to listen to in the background while I was trying to level up through Stranglethorn. And, yeah, and I found Blue Please, TotalBiscuit's podcast. And he was a shock jock, and he had the cynical gimmick, and he'd yell about World of Warcraft for however long. And I really fell in love with the show. It was a highlight of my week. I really enjoyed listening to it. I tuned in a couple of times live. I think he had an IRC chat. He'd do pre-show with music and things like that. And he was into the same kind of music as me. And he was kind of as grumpy as me. And he was bitching about World of Warcraft. And so was I. And yeah, I found it really entertaining and I really enjoyed it. And so I'd listen to that show and go through the back catalog that I'd missed while I was playing WoW. And I really enjoyed it. It added to my escapism. And at the time, trust me, I needed the escapism. Life was not easy for me. I was having multiple panic attacks a day. I found it very hard to leave the house. By the way, if you are struggling with mental health issues, go see a fucking doctor. I didn't for 8 months, and it delayed my recovery by years. So if you have anxiety and depression or any health issues whatsoever, go to a fucking doctor, all right? Thank you. Now, I'm doing this. I'm playing WoW. I'm listening to Blue Please, having a good time. And he transitions over to YouTube, and he made a video about, I think, gold farmers, like a bot he found that was just running back and forth. And it was a funny video, and I thought, oh, cool, he's got a YouTube channel. Maybe he'll make some videos, and I subscribed. And he started to cover World of Warcraft there and transitioned over, I think. I think at the time he was struggling to make money off Blue Please and make ends meet. And he decided to make YouTube videos and just say, fuck it. And I watched that journey, and I enjoyed the content, and I would tune in every day to listen to Azeroth Daily or to see the new beta coverage of Cataclysm. And that turned me on to Jesse Cox, and him and Jesse fighting over trying to get on the front page of MMO Champion. And watching them succeed in that way was really cool. You know, I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the content. I enjoyed the game. I enjoyed TB's attitude. I enjoyed how he was willing to just say what he thought. You know, I respected that a lot. So I followed him on that journey, and eventually he fell out of love with the game, which we all do, with all things. And he transitioned over to covering little indie games on Steam. And at the time, I kind of thought, well, you can't make video games, you know? It's something I'd wanted to do for a long time. I've been playing video games my whole life. My stepsisters introduced me to video games when I was like 2 years old. There's a photo of me playing like Asteroids or some fucking ancient game on some ancient machine when I was a baby. So I've been playing video games for a very long time. They've been a major part of my life forever. And the idea of making video games just never really occurred to me because I always thought, well, you need to be part of a major studio. Now, in the past, I had studied 3D animation, film, and I was a programmer at the time. You know, I was working from home at this point, doing what jobs I could do to sustain myself. But I was working as a programmer, and all these things sort of came together. And I'm watching him cover these indie games, and I'm realizing that Steam's a platform and that you can, just with a couple of people, maybe even just by yourself, make something and show it to the world and sell it. So I started prototyping ideas with a friend of mine, and we came up with something. It was a simple puzzle game, and we thought, you know, who cares? It's fine, whatever. But people played it, and they were like, this is fun. You know, this is fun. And I had a realization that it was possible to do this, that we could make this game, we could publish it on Steam, and if we could get TotalBiscuit to cover it, we might just be able to make a living. And so that was the plan. Let's make this fucking game while playing World of Warcraft. At that point, I was, I think I was playing Wrath of the Lich King. Yeah, I was playing Wrath of the Lich King a lot at that time and leveling up while on lunch breaks and stuff. And me and my friend, we went through and we made this little game. You know, it's not great, but it's all right. And we made the game and we sent it off to Valve, and they said no. And at the time, there was no green light. There was no instant get on Steam. You know, it was actually a curated service. Remember those days? And they said no. And we had stats on their playtime because we're sneaky bastards. And I'm not the kind of person to take no for an answer like that. So I emailed them back and I said, look, you've got 2 minutes playtime. That's not a reasonable time frame to assess a game. Why is it that you rejected us? We've spent the last, 3/4 of a year working on this fucking game. Some information would be helpful. And they were like, well, our firewall blocked some nonsense. And we were like, oh, okay, well, why didn't you just say that? So I sent them a new copy of the game without the online connectivity aspect, and they played it, and they were like, oh, okay, this is pretty cool. And then finally they accepted it. And we published the game after months more crunch because we underestimated how much work was actually involved in getting a game onto Steam. And we published it, and I contacted TotalBiscuit, and I said, hey, man, you know, if you've got the time, we'd love it if you took a look at our game. And he did. And that, combined with a daily deal, took a situation which honestly was quite dire. We released the game and had very little in the way of sales, like 1,000 sales on day one, and then it went down and down and down. And TotalBiscuit's coverage, combined with a daily deal, made me into a successful businessman. It made that venture worthwhile, and we made enough money to continue working for several years after that on other games and other projects. And I was very grateful to him at the time for that, not just because he promoted my work, but because he gave an avenue for indie developers to be known, which was incredibly important back then because there was no marketing tools. We didn't have the money to market things. It was get on the front page of Steam, which at the time meant something. And if you can get someone like TotalBiscuit to cover your work, if your game is decent enough, you'll be okay. And he did that. And that gave me the resources to build a career. And without him, I wouldn't have been able to do that. It gave me the resources to see doctors and therapists and deal with these health issues that I developed over the past couple of years and get out of that dark hole. And without him, I wouldn't have been able to do that. He got me thinking about games in a different way. Prior to that, I just thought about games as entertainment, you know? And if they were bad, and I get disappointed and whatnot. But I started to think about the industry more. I started to think about the ethics of the industry. And I went on to work with a relatively major publisher, and they asked me to do some questionable and unethical things. And maybe if I hadn't run into TB and experienced his view on consumer advocacy, I would have done those things. But I didn't. I refused. And it led to a sort of falling out with the games industry in a way where I was so sick of all the nonsense and the shit associated with it and the complete lack of passion involved in the creation of games with some companies that I decided to walk away from it in the end. But he allowed me to have a career, man. He allowed me to have the resources I needed to help myself and to address my health issues. You know, obviously my work is involved too. I made a video game, for fuck's sake. But without him, I would have been less successful, is what I'm trying to say. So from there, I go into the video games industry. I start working more and more. I'm making other games. I start working with bigger publishers, blah, blah, blah. And I realize that it's not for me. You know, the hours involved, the stress, the being messed about by other companies. It's not fun. It's not fun. And I got burnt out. And I quit. I just quit. I just walked away one day. Had something to do with my mum as well. She got cancer at the time. And I felt the need to spend time with her and take care of her. And it didn't really gel with the 16 to 18 hours a day of working in the games industry. So I made a choice, and that choice was to walk away and spend time with family and to do what I thought was right at the time. But I was helping my mum, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, what am I going to do with my life, man? Like, I did video games. It didn't work out. I couldn't do it. What am I going to do with my life? And then I'm sitting there thinking, man, I always wanted to make YouTube videos. I always wanted to do what TB does. And I couldn't do it. I never had the resources available to do it. I was on 56k dial-up until this point. I live in Australia, by the way. We have terrible fucking internet, if you didn't know. So there was no means for me to make YouTube content. It would take me like a week to upload a video. So by happenstance, I'm helping my mom get through the cancer stuff, looking for opportunities. I'm thinking maybe I just make games on my own. I don't know what to do, right? And then we get good internet. We get the best internet in the country. And I go, fuck it. Let's do it, man. Let's do it. I'm an opinionated guy. I've got a decent voice. Let's talk about stuff on the internet. And I would never have made that choice had I not seen TB be successful in that area. If he hadn't been an inspiration to me, and if he hadn't almost taught me to think differently about video games. So I said, fuck it, let's do it, man. Let's do it. And I had a 5-year goal. My 5-year goal, it's not very lofty, but whatever, was to make enough money to live. I don't want to be rich. I just want enough money to live, you know? Enough money to pay my bills and buy an ice cream. That's kind of what I always say. And the other goal was to be on the Co-optional podcast. At that time, I think it was the TGS podcast. I'm not sure. A podcast I've been watching for a very long time, by the way, since the beginning, since TGS podcast number 1, all the way through. And I wanted to be on that podcast. I wanted to be on the podcast because I wanted to meet TB. I wanted to talk to him about video games. This man I'd looked up to for years, a man who'd helped me with my career, a man who inspired me to make YouTube videos, a man who taught me to look at the ethics of consumerism differently and look at video games differently and game criticism differently. I wanted to talk to him. I wanted to shoot the shit. I wanted to just talk about video games, and that was a goal. And I said, you know, if the end of 5 years I can do that, I'll be proud. I'll be proud that I managed to make enough of a splash to get him to recognize that I existed. and then he did, I didn't think he knew that I was the guy who this video game he reviewed at this time, by the way. I made no effort to make him aware of that until much later. But I was like, I'm going to do this, and if I can get that recognition from him that my content's not shit, then I'm good, right? That's what I wanted. I wanted some validation. I wanted him to be like, good job, man. And whatever, that may be weird, it may be self-indulgent. I don't fucking care, right? That's the reality of the situation. I wanted the recognition from a man who I respected on my work. And 6-8 months into doing YouTube videos, I do a Q&A video, something like that. I can't remember when it was. It doesn't matter. I made a Q&A video, and someone asked in that Q&A video, hey, do you want to be on the Co-optional podcast? And I was like, yeah, fuck yeah, I do. Obviously. Like, it's a major goal of mine to be on that podcast. And I was honest about it. And I said, you know, but I don't know if I'll get to be on that podcast because he's sick. And we don't know how long he has left or how long he's going to work or whatever. You know, these are unknowns right now. And I just kind of assumed at that point that 5 years from then, I didn't know if he'd be alive. I'm just going to be honest with you. So I thought, well, you know, whatever. I'm probably not going to get to be on the podcast. That's fine. I mean, it's not amazing. It doesn't matter, right? His health's more important. But I just thought it wasn't likely. So I was honest about that. And the next day, I see a comment on that video from TotalBiscuit saying, hey, man, you don't have to be a big channel. You don't have to be a benefit to us to come on the podcast. You just have to not be shit. And I responded with something like, okay, I think I can do that. I think I can not be shit. So I sent him a message on Twitter and we set it up. And I spent the week prior to that going on that podcast shitting myself. Because look, man, he's dealing with a much larger audience. His audience is far more critical, partly due to his gimmick, you know. But there are some harsh motherfuckers in his audience. I just want to say that right now. Some of you need to chill out, man. So I was nervous. I was really nervous about going on that podcast. And I had to do it at 4 a.m. Excuse me. I had to do it at 4 a.m. Because of the time zone conflicts. And I was like, fuck it. I'm not getting any sleep. I'm going to stay up all night. It's fine. And we agreed not to put me on camera, which I appreciated. Trust me, because me at 4 a.m. on camera is an unenjoyable sight. But yeah. So I get to go on, and he actually invited me onto the Game of the Year discussions, but I couldn't make it, and I honestly didn't feel I was worthy of that position on his show. I asked for a smaller spot. I don't know why. In retrospect, that was a stupid business move, but I didn't want to talk about Game of the Year as well. That's the other thing. Like just talking about what was the best games this year. It wasn't the discussion I wanted to have. I just wanted to talk gaming, like every other podcast they did, and not be on a special one where It had a specific focus. But anyway, so he invites me on later on. I think it was in January sometime. And I go on, and it's 4 o'clock in the morning, and I'm shitting myself. And I get introduced to Brooke, and I get introduced to Jesse, and I'm like, okay, how's it going, guys? Nice to meet you, blah, 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 blah. Very nervous. I'm like, okay, we're going live. You know, it's a nerve-wracking experience. And I said to them, can I ignore that chat exists? Can I just like not read chat? And they were like, yeah, dude, of course you can. Because I was worried, man. I just wanted to have a conversation with those 3 people. I didn't want to think about the fact that it was being streamed and that it would be viewed by 200,000 people at the time. So I just had a chat. We just talked games, and it was really fun, and I enjoyed it. I had a really great time. I wish I could have done it again, but it was great. I really had a very good time. And look, it didn't do much for my channel, and I didn't expect it to. I got maybe 2,000 subscribers from that podcast. That's not why I went on the show. I went on the show because I wanted to talk to those guys. And in particular, I wanted to talk to TB. I wanted to have the opportunity to share ideas and to discuss gaming with someone I'd looked up to for so long. And to be viewed as a peer, you know? That meant something to me. So we did the podcast. Podcast ends. I'm like, thanks for having me on. And he said, no problem, man. You were a great guest. And I was just like, cool, I'm done. I'm done. Right? I'm done. He thinks I did a good job. I don't know. It's weird, man. I don't know why I cared so much, but I did. I wanted the recognition from him because, you know, he's someone I looked up to. It's like if you're a musician and you've got your favorite musical artist and they hear your track and they say, hey, man, that's not bad. It means something, right? To get that kind of recognition. And after that point, he followed my work. You know, he'd comment on videos. He'd make fun of me on videos. He'd send me messages on Skype telling me I was wrong about things. And it was cool, man. It was cool. He helped. I mean, even just a few weeks ago, I started a new series and, you know, he promoted it on Twitter. Not much. He just liked it, but he didn't have to fucking do that, man. He didn't have to fucking do that. You know, and when I had a problem, or the internet was yelling at me, or I needed advice, I would message him and he would help me. He would give me advice. You know, sometimes he was on holiday one time in fucking Vegas, and I messaged him. I didn't know he was on holiday. And he starts answering my questions. He's like, I gotta go because we're like in the middle of dinner. I'm like, dude, you should have just told me to fuck off. But he was a very, very giving person. He was willing to help people, you know, and many people screwed him over. Many people stabbed him in the back and fucked him over. But even after all of that and years of people screwing him about, he was still willing to help people like me, people with very little reach, very small audiences that really honestly don't matter. He was willing to help us. And he did that for many people, not just me. And I can't help but have endless amounts of respect for him for that. The amount of influence he had on my life in general, just making me feel not shit when I was having a bad time, all the way up to helping me with my career, all the way up to giving me advice on YouTube and how to deal with things. He was a great person to me, and I have a huge amount of respect and admiration for everything that he did for me, everything that he did for all the other people he's helped, and everything he did for this industry. Because without TB, the gaming industry would be very different, especially the PC space. He got developers to pay attention to things they weren't paying attention to before. He organized boycotts. He did all sorts of things to try and improve things for consumers. And he did that until his dying day. That's admirable. He was a very strong person. His battle with cancer was very public and open. The shit he had to deal with, I mean, go listen to his H3H3 podcast. The will that he displayed in his battle with cancer is admirable. And I'm not sure I would be able to do that, you know, to continue working, to continue fighting. That's my story. That's the influence he had on my life. And you're going to find there's hundreds, if not thousands of other people, even just viewers, people who never met him, never knew him, people who've been listening to him speak for years and years that feel a connection with him because of his attitudes on things, because of his likes and dislikes. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of people right now who are sad because a man who was a positive influence in their life has left this earth. It's a very sad time. If you want to help support his family, by the way, there is a GoFundMe. It's official. It's been promoted by Jenna herself. Her husband died. She's unemployed. There are huge medical bills involved. So look, if you have a couple of dollars, the link's in the description below. Please go help out his family. I'm sure he would want that. Share your stories as well. You know, I think it's a good thing to do. to let people know who he was as a person and not just have people remember him for his persona, because he was a much kinder man than maybe he put across sometimes. Finally, I just want to send my condolences to his family. I lost my father in the last year, and it's not an enjoyable experience, to say the least. Unbearable at times, and I wish them the best of luck in their recovery and in building a new life for themselves. And to TotalBiscuit, thanks for everything you did for me. Thanks for everything you did for this industry. It means a lot to a lot of people. I'll see you guys next time.